Good evening. I'd like to start with asking if anyone has any question in mind.
Quite often in meditation, um, when I've gone very deep, but then suddenly I'll start to feel very sleepy. But I'm wondering if I should give into that or should I keep um, trying to go beyond that and see who it is that's knowing the sleep or something like that.
Well, in that regard, meditation is not so much about transcendence, other than using meditation as a way to unite with oneself and one's already existing fullness. So it's not like there's something to transcend other than to recognize as what it actually is, as to recognize what is here, what is one's own being in actuality,
Mhm.
as a fullness, as the fullness that it is.
Mhm.
So no matter what may be going on with the mind, whatever activity the mind may be engaged in, on whatever level, even, it's really about simply acknowledging the being within and without the mind. And to see that the being, whether there is a mind or no mind, remains the same in its
Mhm.
fullness. And that the being is not in conflict with the mind, even if the mind may be troubled. But what happens is when the mind is too active or troubled as such, the attention is kind of absorbed into it, thereby creating this illusion that we are separated from one's own immutability of fullness that our being is really all about.
I guess I haven't gotten to really see my beingness that's always there, even in that, because it takes so like I guess I prefer to be comfortable at that point or something.
The thing is, you must be careful with the thing that you may assume that you know about being, because then that becomes another object of mind. Let's say in a meditation, you're looking to transcend the mind, as if you needed to transcend the mind in order to meet the being. The idea of being remains on that level of ideas, of conceptualization, so that you end up struggling with a state of mind that seek another state of mind. This is not what meditation is about. And also, when the mind is very active or troubled by an idea or another, it
Mm-hmm.
does not want to look at itself, because looking at itself would mean that the being starts to overflow its energy within the mind, thereby bringing the mind to a place of neutrality, which it doesn't want to go into. When the mind is troubled, all it wants is to keep maintaining that activity. It doesn't want to let go, like a dog biting a bone. So then, once the mind has taken control over one sense of being, which it cannot do. It just creates an illusion. It only wants to perpetuate itself into other illusions or ideas. The idea of meditating or tapping into being becomes another way to maintain itself. And so it doesn't work. Or it can subdue an idea over another idea, or it can even control itself, making itself still, but only for a certain time, of course. The next thing you know, the mind goes even wilder because it suppresses itself. It wants itself to behave in a certain manner, thereby suppressing itself. Next thing you know is your mind is even less under your control.
I was just wondering about the sleeping part. When I get to that place in meditation, when maybe the mind is more diffused, it's become blissful. So I give into this blissful state or this sleep, and then I'll just kind of, it'll feel great and it feels wonderful, and I just go to sleep.
The thing with meditation, it's quite common that people fall asleep. In satsang, people fall asleep all the time. And I think a big part of it is because the sense of separate self is not wanting to go into itself and to see that it is based on nothing other than fleeting thoughts. It creates a form of resistance. It's like the habit for some people to take a pill in order to fall asleep in bed. Meditation in and of itself should give you energy. Meditation is really all about gathering chi, energy, letting go of all resistance and duality within oneself. So as the energy becomes whole, then there is no longer any leaking of energy. So relaxation takes place, but not relaxation in a manner of falling into sleep, but a relaxation that allows energy to move inside and build up as a whole. So when there is this tendency for people to fall asleep in meditation, it's an attempt of the separate self to shut itself down so it doesn't need to look into itself and let go of itself. But then again, you must examine what is the motive behind the meditation. Because if you're using meditation as a way to postpone being here and containing yourself as a whole, which seems kind of contradictory, but unconsciously the mind may act that way also. So meditation should not be used as a means to escape one's responsibility to fully meet oneself as we are, which is the meditation's very purpose. And in and of itself, it is the door to fully embrace oneself as we are, not as a way of transcending, but as a way of realizing what it is that we are here and now, in the fullness that we are all about in reality. The thing with the states and the levels of deepening, or even of awakening and realization, is that there's this tendency to nest in them. But that's in relation with the mind itself, right? States or whatever experience or on whatever level, from the lowest to the highest, is just like the waves over the ocean. They're all waves. They'll come
Right.
and go. So that's worth pursuing. It's important, yes, to acknowledge them for what they are, because if you do not acknowledge anything as it is, as everything comes and goes, then you come in denial with what really existence is about in terms of movement and activity, the Shakti itself. It is like saying, yes, waves comes and goes, therefore they're not that worth pursuing on some level, but on another level, it is okay to have it as it is. The ocean as such is not in conflict with the waves, right? The ocean is the waves. Therefore, everything of existence, anything experienceable, perceivable, all the
Mm-hmm.
states that we may be going through, they must all be recognized for what they are. Because you can also see in that confirm where you're at in relation with being able to stand as yourself, as the truth of yourself. For you will see the reflection of that evolutionary status of yourself and how you relate with those different states. And it's really what they are all about. They're like stepping stones on the path. It's a subtle matter. One level, one should not stick to them or seek them. Another level, they have their places in terms of using them as indicative of how you are with the truth of yourself, how you relate with it, and thus confirming for yourself how stabilized you are in the clarity within yourself. For the true being is all inclusive. It's not about discarding anything, it's about embodying, integrating all levels of oneself
Mm-hmm.
within the wholeness that our being is really all about. But because it is itself so full, because it
Mm-hmm.
is itself the fullness, it is also beyond these ideas that the truth of oneself is transcendental, is beyond the mind. So in meditation, what we really do is connecting with the fullness of our being, which can only already be full in this moment. You see, when, for instance, when you feel like you may be troubled with something, whether you're in
Right.
meditation or not, the tendency is to let that drive you, right? Drive your sense of self, thereby experiencing a separation, an activity on the surface, right? So when that takes place and you hold your whole attention into that activity, you find out
Right.
your being is full, even if there may be an activity on the surface that seems to indicate something different.
Like a kind of a heavy emotional state or something like that. Okay.
Yeah, or unhappy, happy or unhappy.
Right, right, right.
You're unhappy or happy is they are all taking place in your awareness. Awareness itself not objectified, although being within and without whatever takes place as waves, as expressions taking place within your being on one level or another. It's like, for instance, today I was waiting for my van to be fixed. It had a mechanical problem and it was on Canby. So I was sitting right on Canby. And of course, there's a lot of cars and people and so on. I just took the time to ask myself, what is really here? You know, instead
Yeah,
of following my mind telling me about the pollution, the noise, the people, so on and so on.
right.
And of course, within seconds, I tap into what's really here, and it's the vastness, reality. That is what is true. And then someone passed by with a cat on his shoulder. And then again, my mind was telling me, oh, the cat must be freaking out. The cat was totally comfortable sitting on this guy's shoulder. And then I could see that the cat was tapping into reality. So it's like this. No matter what's going on with the mind, as long as you allow yourself to see what's really there, then reality stands out. Just like this, over the surface of the ocean. The ocean remains. Same with our own sense of fullness.
So when you're paying attention to the waves and you're in indecision, what do you do?
You stay with it.
Yeah.
Usually, when you're in a state of indecision, you let that state of indecision take control. In other words, you worry about it. So you get wrapped into this energy field. But if you accept it in a way that you embrace it within the fullness of your being, then that very fullness of being will overflow that energy. But the fact remains that from the place of the fullness of being, it doesn't matter, right? If there's an indecision state taking place, right? So that's the main thing. You must reach that place where even if there's an indecision state, it doesn't affect you anymore. It's fine.
I have a question about that. So it seems to me like the ability to function as a human being on the relative field when I'm simply am what I am seems to not be there at that time when I'm fully present with my isness, say, with just doing what I truly am.
Whatever decision will take place by itself.
Yeah, okay. Right. That's what I seem to find again and again that is so. Yeah.
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 And sometimes life moves in a way that the decision that you may have been thinking about is no longer something of your mind. And you just do the right thing, and
Okay.
because you feel at peace, appear as something that you think about. You just do it.
Right. Oh, good. Thank you. Yeah, I was wondering about that. And that instance, you're not moving from preference anymore. There's no preference because there's no little me.
Yeah.
It seems that like just the right thing at the right time happened.
Yeah. So in that regard, again, what's required is to meet the fullness of your being in the moment. Stick with it. Stick with that. Because then what you're doing is you're tapping into the intelligence of reality. That intelligence knows better than you. Guaranteed. The mind cannot figure this out. You know? That's the thing. But when you do allow yourself to experience with it, you know, just taking a moment to hold yourself together, then there's like the magic of reality that somehow make things happen without you knowing about anything. And yes, if you experiment with this consciously, you'll find out every time something will talk to you or will simply take place out of nowhere. And that's the magic. And it's way more powerful than all these ideas of empowerment that we hear so much. Creating one's reality or attracting money or even
Yeah,
the
yeah.
idea of abundance. You tap into reality, you have it all right there. And it's beyond anything, beyond measure, beyond lack. That's the beauty of it. The sacredness, the absoluteness that it is right there. Even within the noise of a city. But yes, we've developed habits of mind to follow our thoughts and emotions and sensations. Which requires some commitment to the task of meeting oneself as we are in our fullness, moment by moment. And yes, sometimes it's harder than other times. You may spend some cycles of being more naturally inclined to be there, and another cycle where it's more difficult. But it's all for the good. They are all necessary situations to allow you to strengthen your practice. until it's natural, until you live your life without a doubt that you are already the fullness that has always appeared as something that you can only reach at some time. If only this or that, and so on and so on. Even within through this situation, again, if you take the moment to meet yourself in the fullness of yourself, then it's okay. Even if you have trouble with being at peace with it all, it's also okay. You acknowledge what's taking place as it is, and you accept what it is as it is. And this is the purpose of it all, to return to oneself. But then again, there are things that the mind will never understand. Like nowadays, there's lots being said about awakening and embodiment. There are all concepts.
I was wondering about that. I mean, it seems to me that I'm getting very tired of hearing the term embodiment because it's been used so often, or like any term, it becomes some kind of a concept. A concept when somebody says embodiment.
Yeah.
It's becoming stuck in, it's like a record playing over and over and over again in the same groove, but not going beyond that one groove.
Yeah.
And different people can even mean different things by that one word. And so everybody's talking this language of embodiment, but forgetting who gives the word meaning and who creates language and what's beyond, what's at the source of all of it. So it's kind of like, I've been feeling that about this whole embodiment.
They're pointers, but always only but remain pointers. There are no conceptualization to make around what it all means. It's impossible. Because if all there is reality as it is, then there can't be a greater embodiment than that. There can be a greater awareness than that, or emptiness of that, or fullness of that, you know? It can't be measured. There was a video on YouTube I ended up looking at. There was a discussion between different well-known teachers about the embodiment of realization. And at some point, it's like a tennis game. Yeah. Makes sense all of a sudden. Trying to define something that you cannot define, no matter what.
Did they get to that place where they saw that, they talked about that and how they couldn't define it? Or oh no.
You could tell that there were some glimpses of it, like one would see it in the moment a little bit, but then the next moment you would get trapped in it. Because then the one would speak about it and take the attention. And then all of a sudden the mind would kick in and make the other person feel like all of a sudden they're not important anymore or not listened to. So like you could observe this whole game playing.
Isn't that so interesting?
Just like a tennis game, like who the most cunning one or
right,
and so on. But it's like no, that's the thing. We cannot conceptualize what it's all about. We use pointers. We use ways to look into oneself. use a certain language, but it can't go beyond than what it is as pointers.
I wondered a bit about that tendency that seems so competitive in a lot of the teachers, where they always seem to be kind of having to puff themselves up and make a better point or something. And it's just, I've noticed that over and over again, and I just always kind of wonder about it. But the way you just described it,
But that's the thing, when you become a known teacher, all of a
yeah,
sudden you have something to maintain.
yeah, yeah.
An authority and so on to maintain an organization and without
Hmm.
talking about money, and all of a sudden it's going the other way.
But I'm just wondering if there, if that also can be very good for sadhana, like that whole process of going through that, because one's facing those parts of oneself over and over again and again, going into who they truly are as essence, rather than getting caught in the on the surface level of competition, making a better point and all of that. I mean, that seems to be going on the outside, but on the other hand, some of these teachers are amazing, right? And it seems like they're not, that's just part of their manifestation. And it just seems like a game, you know? So I guess that's the question I would have about is like,
Yeah, but within true or genuine teachings, there is much said about the ego self being a type of gravitational field. It pulls you back into the sense of separate self until you reach a place where you kind of get out of that gravitational field, which is described as being the true enlightenment versus self-realization, which comes and goes. So at some point, it is as if there is no longer any interest for you. Hold on to a sense of self, consciously or unconsciously.
but yet the body mind will still be functioning as if it's a teacher, but it's like an empty shell.
That's not a problem in and of itself at all. Life as a whole is not disturbed by everything taking place in itself on all levels. But you're most likely going to see it coming, you know, because your sense of presence has strengthened itself so much that you see all thoughts coming, rising, and possibly revolving around a sense of self. As you perceive it and see it, it's not attaching itself to your being. So you see it coming, you recognize it, and it subsides within your presence. So all needs to attach a sense of importance to that separate self at some point vanishes altogether. It doesn't mean that there won't be certain tendencies that you may watch rising. They will.
Mm-hmm.
But then because have solidified your sense of presence within your being, you get to see it starting to rise. And as you follow this along, it also subsides within your presence. As all needs related to that sense of separate self also subside. but it's a rare case, that's for sure. As it says in the traditional Advaita, as it points out that what prevents enlightenment to take place is the sense of I. Therefore, give all your attention, intensity of being into the annihilation of this sense of I. Therefore, never leave sight of this sense of I. And you won't fall prey into the illusion of such an I. Whereas if you constantly look for what's beyond the I, then you might end up fooling yourself into the belief that you've gone there and not ever being able to look at yourself anymore. Therefore, living in an illusion of realization, which happens all the time. Which is meant to happen too, only to further indicate that there's still work to do. So it's better to modestly look at your sense of I rather than seek the transcendence of the I. Usually when you're no longer concerned about attaining anything, you're most likely going to find that you're at peace with whatever you appear to be in the moment, thereby moving beyond it, just like that. And even if what you appear to be, you don't like it, if you're at peace with it, then somehow there's a space, right? Kind of funny. Can laugh at it because it's all infantile. Other than using these moments as pointers to where you're at within your awareness of yourself. So it's less a question of resolving anything on that level, on the level of what appears as yourself, than to use these moments to see how awareness you bring into your experience. And if you do allow yourself to contain the fullness that you are in that moment, then whatever you may have appeared to be is not even something to think about. And if it comes back, then you do the same. Because what wants to change what? It's all just thoughts, concepts, hearsays. What's truly there as yourself is reality alone. And that's immutable. That is the center point of the whole wheel of diversity that your so-called self, character, personality takes place amongst everything else, amongst all the other people around you. It's all taking place around one center point. The center point within yourself, within everyone else. The center point of it all, reality itself, the intelligence, the consciousness, itself the true I. So when caught with indecisions, for instance. You can always like inquire into it in the sense that you ask yourself where it is taking place. You would think that you should know that, isn't it? For
in my head.
For some reason, all thoughts only take place in our heads. But yes, when you're, engaged in some situations that require some level of decisions, it feels as if decisions need to take place, right? But if you are really honest with yourself and look into it, you see that this is a belief. You think, you assume that you do need to like come up with a decision. It's a belief system. It's like someone that is caught in the addiction of smoking. There's no doubt in the mind that the cigarette is needed, right? It's the same with decisions. It appears as if we're the one responsible for the course of things. It's not necessarily the truth. If reality is a whole, if reality alone is that which is behind everything taking place, then everything was already set in a way that things happen exactly as they should, regardless of what we think or what not, regardless of whatever decision we take. But then again, it's the unknown. That's the thing.
Yeah.
When you're in that position, having to figure out
Yeah.
or take some decision, then your mind is so like under stress that it wants to know, like it needs to know in order to cover up with its inherent stress. That is the stress. But again, you must use that as an opportunity to like really, really contain yourself in your fullness. Because when it's difficult like this, the impact that it has when you allow yourself to contain yourself in your fullness is much greater than when, for instance, everything is going well and you're meditating on cushion. And yet, yes, when you meet challenge and you do go through the process of going within with your full heart and consciousness, then you see that life is beautiful like this. You know, the very reality of the vastness inherent to life stands out. And that's why we're here. That's why we happen to live in this body-mind apparatus on this earth plane. So that we come to a place where we no longer mistake reality for our projections. So the need of materialization becomes less and less and less. So as a soul, we can ascend into much higher realms of understanding, clarity, and purity. So this is the task on a daily basis, to contain yourself in your fullness till there is mastery.